Case 623 by Danny Yu. Chapter 43. "Dumb," says the agent, sounding more than a little confused. "It's all Pierce can do not to laugh. It's good to see something positive now that Stark is back and things are up in the air. But dumb is a good assessment of the caregiver. She is loyal, but not very bright. It promises good things that little Johanna at 4 months can already tell as much." "Do you wish she'd been here all along?" Jamie asked softly, snuggling into his towel. His dark hair had been turned several shades darker by salt water, and his trunks were still dripping. "Instead of me, I mean." "Jamie, no!" Tony said, but it felt like having the arc reactor installed all over again. "I wish you had both been here, each and every day from the moment you were born. I would never, ever want to trade one of you for the other. You hear me?" Jamie gave a small shrug before finally nodding. "I know," he said. "I love you too, kiddo," Tony said, reaching out and ruffling Jamie's sun-crusted hair. Jamie smiled up at him. "I'm glad she's here," he said. "I don't like the island. I like that we're having a vacation. It's hard, I know," Tony said, and he did. At first, it had seemed so easy, slotting Maria into their little micro-family. But then all the little snags came. Pepper's press release, and the press following them all around even more than normal, trying to get a shot of Maria. And there were Maria's nightmares, some of which were bad enough that Tony had let her sleep in his bed several nights a week. There were the days Tony had spent attempting to play dolls with Maria in her room while Jamie had to go to school. And maybe it was true that Tony was paying a tiny bit less attention to Jamie than he had been. It wasn't like you could help it. Maria needed him so much right now. But how the hell was he supposed to be there for her as much as she needed him to be without neglecting Jamie and all the attention he had come to expect from Tony? "You know Maria's had a bad life up until now," Tony said. "You have been her only real point of light. And I know you're used to mine and Maria's relationship going through you. But it's different now. It has to be. We need to give her a better life, and I know it sucks that it means I have to spend so much time with her right now, when it used to be only you and me. I know it hurts that you can't be part of everything she and I have anymore. But that's how it's gotta be." "I know," Jamie said, leaning against Tony's side and looking out over the beach to where Maria was doing an oddly inexpert power breaststroke in the water. It's strange." "I know," Tony said. "Everything used to go through you. Now we gotta work on a new dynamic, where you and Maria still have your relationship, and you and I still have our relationship, but Maria and I gotta have our own without you as our middleman. That doesn't make you any less important to either one of us. You're still my kid, and you're still Maria's brother. You're still both our family. It's just that I gotta be able to help Maria directly now. You get that? Same way I help you when you feel bad or have nightmares or need help." Jamie breathed out, putting most of his weight on Tony now. "I think I get it," he said. "It's just scary, having her here for real." Tony let out a dry chuckle. "You don't say," he said. Maria was on her feet now, out in the water, waving her arms and shouting indistinguishably, huge smile on her face. Tony gave Jamie a gentle shove. "Go on," he said. Jamie flashed him a grin before running into the waves to join his twin sister. "Anthony," Jocasta said one evening, just a couple of weeks before the kids had school again. Her voice was soft, with a fierce sort of undertone, all in a refined New England accent with a hint of something Germanic. Tony remembered modeling it on a lady he'd met a few times as a kid, hanging around S.H.I.E.L.D. waiting for Howard or Auntie Peggy. He couldn't remember her name or much of anything about her, just that she had been nice, beautiful in a bright yellow sweater, and very, very smart. "Joe," Tony returned, flashing her a smile. For all that she was currently his youngest AI, she felt older than any of them, more mature, but then that was how he designed her. "You have anything for me?" "I have found nothing pertaining to female super soldiers, or additional winter soldiers," Jocasta said. "But there was a file and a video clip, perhaps several layers of encryption. I don't believe it's relevant to the search, but I do believe you want to see it." "Sure," Tony said. "Give me a moment and I'll come down to the shop." He set the coffee machine to brewing and checked in on both kids' rooms. Both, thank fuck, looked to be sleeping peacefully. Maria had Jamie's buggy mare tucked to her chest. Tony couldn't help but smile, both at the sight and at the knowledge that Jamie was willing to share his security blanket, so to speak, with his sister. He really was an awesome kid. Let me know if something happens, he said. Jocasta by now knew to check on their breathing patterns and pulse rate and let him know if a panic attack or nightmare seemed to be developing. Of course, Anthony, Jocasta said. Tony made sure to smile again, positive reinforcement and all that. Then he picked up his finished cup of coffee and headed for the stairs. He jogged down into the shop and called the monitors and machines to life with a wave of his hand. He plopped into one of the chairs, spun around once, and took a long drink of his coffee. All right, Joe, hit me. Anthony, Jocasta said. There was a certain amount of hesitation to her voice now, as though she'd grown unsure of all this, indicating a level of sensitivity far beyond what he would have expected from her time online. She might have been in contact with Vision about the situation. Both she and Friday seemed to talk more with him than Tony did, which, yeah, it sucked, but neither Tony nor Vision could seem to figure out how they were supposed to act around one another. At least Vision didn't seem to have those problems with the kids, and they loved it when he came around for Sunday dinner. Perhaps I should summarize my findings. You don't need to see the footage. Tony grimaced. With you saying it like that, dear, I think I really do. He let out a long breath. Could you and your sassier sister get Mickey down here, if it's that bad? Certainly, Anthony, Jocasta said, even as Friday piped up with, Yes, boss. All right, Joe, Tony said. Run the video. He recognized that bit of road. The next thing Tony was sure of was that he was on his knees on the floor, hugging a trash can to his chest and throwing up everything it felt like he had ever eaten. Mickey was a warm weight against his side, whimpering softly in what Tony interpreted as sympathy. Cold sweat coated Tony's whole body. He burnt with rage, even as shock sent flashes of ice through his veins. Most of all, more than anything, he felt so sick. His stomach turned and his throat seemed to flutter. He threw up again. Sweethearts, I need you working together on this. He managed at long last. He slowly, finger by finger, uncurled one hand from around the edge of the can and buried it in Mickey's fur instead. I want you to cross-reference Sergeant James Buchanan Barnes and the Winter Soldier. Sergeant Barnes! Howard had shouted, and the words resounded over and over in Tony's mind, ricocheting through his brain. Tony never heard his father sound so shocked, so frightened. It wasn't anything he'd ever have associated with Howard Stark. And yet that was how he died. Skull smashed apart, pleading and begging for the life of his wife, shocked that the killer was someone he'd admired, had thought a friend, had thought dead. Anthony, Jocasta said, I'm calling Dr. Banner down here. The scene flashed through Tony's head again and again. That wintry, all-too-familiar Long Island road, the motorcycle, the car, the gleam of a metallic arm, Howard's pleading, Tony's mom begging, screaming, a smashed skull, a flesh hand wrapped around Tony's mother's throat, strangling her over and over and over again, slogging through his mind on repeat like a bad pop-up that refused to be shut down. He threw up again. Mickey pushed up under his arm, pressed as close to him as he thought she could. She let out another whimper, licked his cheek. Tony let out a sob. His whole body shook. The trash can shook so badly he had to let it go. The next whiff of vomit hit his jeans. The acidy stench turned his stomach all over again. A new coat of sweat sprang up. His heart was pounding 100 miles per second. Tony! Bruce shouted. God! Tony! God! And then a pair of slender arms wrapped around him, pulled him close. Bruce didn't shy away from the vomit, from the spilled coffee on the floor, from Tony's shaking form. He just held him, and Tony clutched Bruce right back. He killed them, Tony managed. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't... Howard wasn't drunk driving. He stopped for a moment, heaved in a breath. I always thought it was his fault. I thought he drove drunk. I thought... But it was Hydra. It was Barnes. He killed my mom! Bruce didn't speak, just held him that much closer. Jocasta? He asked. Behind himself, Tony heard the video start back up. With a sob, he freed both of his hands, smashed them over his ears, blocking out every bit of sound that he could. He couldn't watch that again, couldn't hear it, couldn't. Barely a few minutes later, Bruce pried his hands loose and wrapped them up tight again. Shit, don't... Fuck, I don't even... He stopped, and Tony didn't have to look at him to know he was turning green. Fucking hell, I'm so sorry, Tony. Tony leaned forward just enough to bury his head in Bruce's shoulder and managed another sob. It was all he could do to hold in another bit of vomit. He killed my mom.
I know, Tones,
Bruce said, voice suddenly unbelievably soft.
I know it hurts, and I know it sucks. My mom didn't die in the best of ways either. But you know it wasn't Barnes, don't you? Not really.
Tony battered down a wave of rage, and then sorrow, another batch of cold sweat. He tried to pull away to throw up again, but Bruce held him fast, and the vomit ended up on Bruce's shirt like Tony was a baby. Still, as much as he wanted to strike out, as much as he wanted to avenge his mother's death, as much as he wanted to punish somehow, as much as he'd always wanted that... He knew. Manchurian candidate, he managed.
Exactly, Bruce said. It wasn't Barnes, not really. He couldn't help it. He was brainwashed and under orders. Hydra killed your parents. But why, Tony? Think. Why would they kill your parents? Why take Howard Stark out then and not in all the decades he had to have been a thorn in their side? That's something to look into, something to do. And you could research the Winter Soldier. Research him all you want, but don't go after him unless he does something to deserve it after DC. It's not Barnes who killed your mom, it's Hydra. It's the creature they made, and if he's still that creature, I'll fucking smash him myself. But if he's not...
Tony nodded against his shoulder. I get it, he said. I do. It hurts so much. I didn't think it would hurt so much. I thought Howard did it. I always thought he did. Am I a bad son for that?
No, Bruce said. But I think we have to assume from now on out that the team is not exactly at the top of Steve's priorities.
Tony pulled back, looked Bruce in the eyes. For a moment his head spun. His parents' words still crashed through his head. What? He managed, voice strangely slurred even to his own ears.
It's all pretty obvious, Bruce said. Isn't it? The Winter Soldier was a major part of the DC debacle. Since DC, Steve's been running his own op with Nat and Sam Wilson. Wilson especially has been all over the globe for reasons we chose not to look into. Now, Steve may not know the modern world, but he sure as hell knows that you are the person to go to when looking for something. Yet he never came to you. He chose to keep it silent. Obviously, he recognized Barnes and has been trying to track him down. But there is only one possible reason he never asked you for help. Why wouldn't you have helped track Barnes down for him? You're a legacy baby. Barnes probably meant more to you when you were 3 than he's ever done to Wilson.
Tony couldn't answer, could only retch into the trash another time and clutch Bruce and Mickey to him. Fucking hell. Fuck it all! Steve knew. He managed. He fucking knew!